has a chance?
So far, I don't see anybody. I'm not impressed with their group.
That was President Trump this weekend after a growing number of Democrats threw their hats in the 2020 presidential race. So far, 5 Democratic lawmakers have announced they're officially running for president and have started visiting early voting states. 3 others have formed presidential exploratory committees. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke indicated he's inching closer to a bid. Oprah interviewed the Texas Democrat today. O'Rourke told her, quote, "I have been thinking of running for president and that he will make a 2020 decision this month." More than a handful more still have to make a decision. So what does it mean for President Trump? I want to bring back our panel. Ed O'Keefe is in Washington. Linda Tran, Caitlin Huey-Burns, and Michael Graham are here with me in New York. Ed, let me start with you. We heard the president there. So far, the president says that he's not impressed. But, of course, it's not like he's going to praise a Democrat either way.
Yeah, and you know, he's clearly paying attention because he has credited Kamala Harris in that interview and in other interviews with a smooth launch. Has said repeatedly that he thinks Elizabeth Warren is vulnerable because of the controversy surrounding her decision to self-identify as Native American, and otherwise believes that none of the others necessarily rise to his level of competition. So we'll see. But we know that the White House is starting to keep tabs. He is building his re-election campaign across the river in Northern Virginia, and they are preparing quite seriously and quite furiously for the campaign to come.
So I want to play some of what the president has had to say about potential 2020 candidates in recent months. Let's listen.
And then you have Cory Booker, who destroyed Newark. I mean, the job he did in Newark, New Jersey.
And a sad thing happened last week because Elizabeth Warren was exposed as being a total fraud, and I can no longer call her Pocahontas because she has no Indian blood. I can't call her.
We call him 1% Biden. Until Obama took him off the trash heap, he couldn't do anything. Now he's talking about running. Tough guy. He's tough.
All right, so Michael.
Where to begin?
Yeah, great, come to me.
Where to start? A lot to unpack, but first of all, how effective are those lines of attack at this point in his presidency?
I mean, they're for the basis, for his crowd, you know, the same way that when, you know, Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren take on Trump. It's great. It is interesting, though. I was at 3 New Hampshire events with potential candidates, including Julian Castro and Howard, Mike Bloomberg. And they really downplayed their talk about Trump. It was interesting. They really talked about themselves, their narrative, why they're in. It was when Adam Schiff, who decided not to get in, showed up. It was cleats high, just bam, just beating up Trump nonstop. And I see, watching this early on, there's a lot, their focus is so much on the primary vote. They've really got to find some way in a field of 20, 30, 3,000, you know, to put together a winning team, particularly in these early states, where you talk about in New Hampshire, a swing of 3,000 votes is probably going to decide who comes in first, second, and third. So you need your people, and that's what the Democrats seem to be focused on.
It has been interesting to hear some of the rhetoric from candidates like Julian Castro and others. Let me turn to you. I've just been handed a story by the Washington Post here, Linda, about Senator Elizabeth Warren. So, you know, we heard the president there and his continuing line of attack against her. So the headline here is Elizabeth Warren apologizes for calling herself Native American. She says this, quote, "I can't go back, but I am sorry for furthering confusion on tribal sovereignty and tribal citizenship and harm that resulted." How much of an issue could that be for her, potentially?
Well, I don't know how much of an issue it's going to be over the long run, but frankly, it was a smart move to address it and try to get past it. And she got a good reception from representatives of the tribes, and hopefully she's burying this for the longer term. Otherwise, it was certainly going to be something to dog her. I mean, all that said, Donald Trump is certainly going to continue to bring it up, especially when he's speaking to his base, to Michael's point, and for that point, it's not going to go away.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. It's just I live in Massachusetts, and Senator Warren has been struggling. You know, she had that DNA rollout, and the thing that really scared Democrats, and I know, is that she thought it went great. And everyone's like, oh, that was the Titanic. Now she's involved in trying to help a local tribe get a casino. It's a problematic. Now it turns out that the tribe has money problems. And she is going to deal with some aspect of this long after this apology because of stuff on the ground.
So on that point, my producer's pointing out, so there's a graph in here. As Warren undergoes increased scrutiny as a presidential candidate, additional documents could surface to keep the issue alive. Using an open records request during a general inquiry, for example, the Post obtained Warren's registration card for the State Bar of Texas, providing a previously undisclosed example of Warren identifying as an, quote, American Indian. Linda, that would seem problematic.
It would definitely be problematic, but the fact that she chose this moment to apologize gives her the opportunity to point to that moment, saying, you know what, I did some things that I may not have thought through or I may not be so proud of, but I'm sorry for it, and then move on to pivot on to the next
Linda,
thing.
Oh, go ahead, Ed.
Linda, she didn't reveal this. The Post got it itself, and she must have known this was out there. And if she didn't, she forgot, and that's bad self-opposition research. You know that as a consultant. So this proves that there may actually be even more out there about this than she has let on so far. Remember, the Boston Globe published an exhaustive review of her employment and discussions with her colleagues about what went on at Harvard and whether or not she was given preferential treatment. They determined she didn't. Annie Linsky, who wrote that, is now at the Post and continued the line of reporting and found this in Texas. So it begs the question, is there anything back in Oklahoma where she grew up? Is there anything in Pennsylvania when she worked at the University of Pennsylvania? This suggests there might be, and it's open invitation to keep looking.
Yeah, I mean, Caitlin, it seems like this could potentially remain in the headlines here.
Well, last month I was in Iowa when she was asked about this, not by a reporter, but by an Iowa voter. And the way that it was phrased was, why are you giving, by this DNA test, why were you giving Donald Trump fodder to go after you? And so this speaks to kind of the earlier topic that we were talking about, which is how these candidates are trying to define themselves. And we know that just talking, you know, we've been talking to lots of voters and we've seen in polling that this idea of electability is huge, is at a premium. Voters want someone who can defeat Donald Trump. Now, they don't know exactly, or we don't know exactly who that candidate will be, but it is a lens that they're using to view these candidates. And so there was a lot of concern among Democrats that Elizabeth Warren kind of opened herself up to that by going this route.
All right, I want to talk more about 2020, but first I have been handed excerpts from Stacey Abrams' Democratic response, and I just want to pull out one quote here. This is what she will say tonight after the President's State of the Union address. Quote, in Georgia and around the country, people are striving for a middle class where a salary truly equals economic security, but instead, families' hopes are being crushed by Republican leadership that ignores real life or just doesn't understand it. Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, taking on Trump on the economy, you know, there's a theory in politics, you go after their strong suit, you know, they don't let them have a strong suit, but that is really a tough area. There are so many other areas to make this work. When you've got astonishing numbers for jobs month after month, when wage growth is actually faster among blue collar and working class than it is at the top for the first time that I can remember, that's Trump's best story. She's got a lot of other stories to tell about Trump.
At the same time, though, you have comments from Wilbur Ross, Linda. You have you know, other examples where people will point to various statements that have been made and say it represents how out of touch some in Washington are, starting with the person in the Oval Office.
Well, yes, and also we can't ignore the fact that we're 10 days away from another potential shutdown. We've just come off of the longest shutdown in the nation's history, and 800,000 federal workers, 1 million federal contractors, they're all still feeling the impact of that, despite the fact that we were able to get the government back open again. And so all of the polling shows that people are upset about the way things are going and feeling like Washington and the White House in particular don't understand the everyday concerns of working Americans.
And that's kind of what the 2020 candidates have been tapping into, because they know that it is hard to run against a good economy, and you never want to appear as if you're cheering for the economy to turn. But they do, you know, view this issue of fairness as something that is really key, and it applies kind of across different issues. So from taxes and the economy to education and other issues, that's what you're going to be hearing them tap into.
Ed, can I just ask about this choice by Democrats to have Stacey Abrams deliver this rebuttal, or this response to the State of the Union? She is an unconventional choice when you look at past Democratic responses.
And Republican. She's the first sort of non-office holder to give the address on behalf of the opposition party. Also the first African-American, I believe, to do it, at least for the Democrats. Look, people who end up giving this speech have a mixed history. Three people who gave it became president one day: Bill Clinton, Gerald Ford, and George H.W. Bush. In the case of Abrams, Democrats are hoping that she one day becomes either governor of Georgia or a senator from Georgia. There's been big push to get her to run against David Perdue in 2020, but she's opening the door, keeping it open, to possibly trying to run for governor again. And while she is a former political office holder, Democrats would argue she is the present of their party. A woman, a minority, someone in a state that they hope can turn purple or blue in the coming election cycles, and someone who they believe speaks quite explicitly and effectively to the concerns of people who identify themselves as Democrats or may just be upset with the president for whatever reason. So an unconventional choice, and she'll give the address tonight from somewhere in the Atlanta area, but one that is expected to sort of really convey the thoughts of a lot of Democrats these days who feel that the president, and by extension Republicans, are out of touch.
And you know, Ed, you say the candidate in the now. New Hampshire Journal was in the field a few weeks ago with a poll, and my favorite question was, we asked Democrats, who do you think best represents your party today? We gave them three choices: Hillary Clinton, kind of the establishment; Elizabeth Warren, the progressive, but the pre-2018 progressive; and then Ocasio-Cortez. Hillary Clinton came in a distant third, not even 17%. Piece said that this is my party. Ocasio-Cortez doubled her, and Elizabeth Warren 55%. In New Hampshire, a purple state, the progressives were 80% of this is how I see my party.
Interesting. All right, I want to read another line from these excerpts here from Stacey Abrams' Democratic response. She will say, quote, "The foundation of our moral leadership around the globe is free and fair elections, where voters pick their leaders, not where politicians pick their voters." Linda, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say no surprise that she is going to be focusing on the issue of the electoral irregularities and voting rights. And, you know, this is something that she has dedicated years of her career to. She started an organization recently, Fair Fight, that's also focused on that as well. And also it is increasingly this marquee issue on the left in particular, as we think about SCOTUS decisions, we think about the issues with 2016 and what we're looking ahead to potentially in 2020. This is certainly something that you're going to see lots of Democrats talk about, whether it's about redistricting or it's about access to the ballot or any of these other issues that we've seen come up.
As I continue to look at these, she will also say this is the next battle for our democracy, one where all eligible citizens can have their say about the vision we want for our country. We must reject the cynicism that says allowing every eligible vote to be cast and counted is a, quote, power grab. So that would seem to speak to Linda's point there.
Absolutely, very much. And this is something that she has been talking about, especially after her loss in Georgia. And you know, what's interesting about choosing Stacey Abrams is that, you know, to Ed's point, she certainly reflects the politics that Democrats believe are happening now. But it's a way for Democrats to elevate a black woman who also lost an election. Remember, we're talking a lot about Beto O'Rourke, who lost an election as well. He's been talked about in a 2020 kind of presidential conversation, and Abrams has not. So there has been some concern, you know, within the party and some criticism outside of it of kind of why elevate some over the other. So this, at least, I think Democrats are trying to make a statement with that.
So at the same time, we don't know if the president is going to get a Republican primary challenger looking ahead to 2020. But here's what some possible challengers have said.
I've always said that I do hope that there is a Republican who challenges the president in the primary. I still hope that somebody does, but that somebody won't be me. I will not be a candidate.
So, will you run against President Trump either as a Republican in the primaries or as an independent?
Chris, as you know, all options are on the table, and we look every day. I have a team of people who look every day at the factors that go into a consideration like that.
Let's repudiate the debilitating politics practiced elsewhere, including just down the road in Washington, where insults substitute for debate, recriminations for negotiation, and gridlock for compromise.
All right, so Ed, let me ask you, what are the arguments for and against running against the president at this point?
And it's the last gentleman we saw there, Larry Hogan, the sitting governor of Maryland, who probably is most likely to take this down the road of a possible primary challenge, at least in the Republican Party. Senator Flake, of course, is one of our colleagues now. Governor Kasich is on the fence about whether to do it and how to do it. But Hogan, we know, is definitely sniffing around. And you know why we know that, Elaine? You don't invite Jeb Bush to come speak at your inauguration if you're not trying to poke the bear. And he spoke at Hogan's inauguration
it's a pretty
last
big poke,
month.
yeah.
That's a big one. Look, the calculation, of course, is that you could have the entire Republican establishment, or the Trump-loving members of the Republican Party, come crashing down on you and your people and whatever network it is you're trying to build. The other risk, of course, is that you just find no traction, and therefore you struggle mightily. The fact that Hogan might do this as a sitting governor, however, gives him a power base, gives him some infrastructure, not only in the Free State, but potentially across the country. And that is what is so alluring to a lot of people who would like to see somebody challenge him. You saw the RNC take steps about 2 weeks ago to essentially all but declare Trump the nominee of the party in 2020, but left open the door to possibly having somebody mount a primary challenge. They simply didn't go all the way because they acknowledged that, look, he could step down, he could die, he could, something else could happen to him, and we can't legally write in that Donald Trump is our nominee, because what if something changes in the next few years? But they went to great lengths to make it clear that their preference is for him to be the nominee, and they're trying to deter others from trying.
All right, be fascinating to watch either way. Ed, Linda, Caitlin, and Michael, thanks to you all.